Anyway, oh yeah, the microphone's cutting out. Don't worry, I'm gonna for the review. I don't need. Yeah, so I'm going to change my. Back. I'm going to use a spare mic for the review, so that way we don't have to worry about the over and over again. Be right back. Okay, so I'm switching mics to a different one because you don't need my voice acting anymore. So it will just be the normal. I'll just use the normal microphone the microphone that's a little worse, but it was used for the group stream, so so you can hear me. So I guess that concludes the playthrough, guys. That's it. And there isn't anything more you can do in the game, so yeah, I guess we can call this playthrough done. Wow, I didn't expect to finish this. So anyway, I will talk about the next game after I go ahead and do my favorite part, the review. So this one shouldn't be as long of a review because we don't have that many. We don't have so many things to talk about in this game because the game's not that long, honestly. Anyway, let me see. So normally with these kind of games, I have to split it between story, graphics, sound, and gameplay. This game is interesting because this game is from 1989, 88. And like this port of the game came out in 1989 in Japan and 1990 for us, like the very beginning. So we have to take into account that this game is almost 30 years old. Let's not think about that. But yeah, this game is very old. And I was alive when this game came out. Anyway, because of that, we have to take it against its peers and against the generation it came out of. So there are things I will talk about, and I'm not going to be grading this game against modern sensibilities because I don't think that's fair. So, anyway, so let's go ahead and talk about the story really quick. There isn't too much to it. It is actually quite involved for even the 80s. Like in terms like it's a little more there's a little more to it than like Dragon Quest 1 or Final Fantasy 1, but like there's not too, but like I do like that there's like they try to emphasize like the characters. The plot's fairly simple. Like there's the remake's actually a little bit better about fleshing out why exactly things are really bad. In Asteria, this is kind of like a historical piece of art. The remake's a little bit more fleshed out. There's more stuff. Like the actual reason why Asteria is in the crapper is because they literally can't leave the island. So Asteria is an island, and nobody can come in and nobody can leave. Adol actually got in the remake version, the canon version. Nowadays, Adol actually got shipwrecked on Asteria first in Ys 1, and so he has to he's gonna try to save the land. Most of the story beats are about the same. You meet the two goddesses in disguise, of course. I mean, some of them are quite taken. One of them is quite taken by you. Let me see. And then you go out and then you go up Darm Tower and you defeat the Darkfact, who was a descendant of one of the priests, but he went to the dark side. Once you use that to get to the actual land of Ys, you find out what's actually happening there too, and eventually, like through some exploration, you find out that you have to beat Dallas, and Dallas is the douche guy who's ruining everything. And in the way, you'll meet some characters like Lilia and like all those people, and like the Defenders of the Six Priests. There's actually quite a lot of lore in this game for something at this time. There's actually quite a bit of lore, and actually, what happened is even in there was actually a book that was beside the game. Yeah, Dallas. Yeah, Dallas. Not Taoist. So yeah, there's actually quite a lot of there's actually a book by the side of the game because they couldn't cram in all the story they wanted, so you can actually read about how Ys was created and the goddesses. And I heard that this story is actually elaborate more. So I guess like it's kind of weird where like there's supposed to be a bit more to it, and like it's just limited by the fact that this is in the 80s. So, but like it's a simple enough story. I mean, it's not like wow, it's mind blowing. I've never, but it does like it is charming, and the characters are pretty charming too, for like the with how little dialogue they can actually have in the game due to technical limitations. So I mean, it gets the job done, and it gives you a reason to fight because you want to save these people. You want to bring peace to land, both the land of Ys and a way the land of Esteria as well. Let's see. And so yeah, there's really not too much. The story's pretty short because of it's only a 15-hour game at maximum. So yeah, I don't really have anything to say. I'm just like it gets the job done. It doesn't. There's not so much dialogue that I have to sit through it. So that's kind of nice for this version of the game. The remake is a lot more dialogue heavy, but not too much more. But like just there's just a bit more to it. The one true path. Oh, excuse me. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, who says I have to be Taoist? Anyway, so yeah, that's it for the story. It's a pretty simple. There's not too much to it, but like I think the remakes does a little bit of a better job. So if you're, I know it's kind of like yes, it's pretty simple. The caveat is that the remake version is probably a bit more involved. So you should definitely check that out. I can't review the remake version because I haven't played it all the way through. But yeah, for this game, it gets the job done. Let's see. For graphics, as of this time, this is 1989-90, and this is really pretty good for the time. Like, it's one of the ones that pushed the... Like, even if you look at the illustrations for, like, the little, like, the CD stuff, it actually looks really good for this time. I mean, they were trying to bring in the 80s and 90s aesthetic, and obviously, of course, it's aged. I mean, clearly, this is not a game from... This is not a modern game. And the sprites are very simple, and, like, they're not as, like... They're not quite as intricate as, like, a Super Nintendo one that would come, like, 2 or 3 years late, like... years later, and it's not quite Super Nintendo level, but like they did a really good job of like it looks really clean. It still looks pretty good. Like the FMVs still look really nice. Are they really FMVs? I guess they're kind of FMVs. Yeah. The videos, even though they're in this little like tiny box because like the way the console is too weak to render it at like full screen, but it still looks really good. And like it's amazing what you can do with such limited hardware. I mean, if you think about it, your iPhone is probably okay, guys. This console we're playing this thing on is weaker than your iPhone. Think about that. Like anything, like even your PC from like 1995 or when you were born, then if you had been born like in the mid 90s, this is weaker than any of the computers that were around the time you were born. So the fact that they could actually pull off like some of these awesome effects is really crazy. Like the art, like it's so nice, and like we thought this was cutting edge back then. So like I definitely think it definitely holds up, and like the art style is really nice. I'm a little bit. I do have to caveat that I'm also a little biased toward like the style of like the 90s and the late 80s, and it's nice to see it again. It's been so long, and you don't see it as much these days because it's not in vogue. But like I do like the fact that it's pretty, and like even for graphic wise, it's pretty clear where you need to go. One thing that's nice because the game has to be so simplified is that you don't usually have trouble figuring out where you need to go. There's only some times where, honestly, the tower, like during like the Solomon Shrine, and was kind of a pain because it was difficult. One thing I have to criticize is like it's difficult to tell where one thing is under another. It's super confusing, and oh jeez, that was really rough to deal with. In like, it is unfortunate that they were trying to make it really intricate dungeon. It's just, oh jeez, I cannot tell. Sometimes like they like to hide things, and because it's partially also related to the lack of a map, but you had difficulty tell where the secret entrance is or whether you could walk under something, and I think that's kind of a not so great part about like the graphical part of it. Like, the technology is cutting edge, but like, oh no, I'm not a really big fan of that kind of stuff. Like, even like Zelda, which is a little bit, yeah, just a little like earlier than this game. Like, still, like, I don't have. They were very clear to make sure you knew where you could walk, for the most part. And I'm thinking like there was definitely could have definitely like eased up. I mean, I know they want to make it cool, but they could have made sure like to make the dungeons, some parts of the dungeons, easier to walk through, or like very clear to like clearly demarked of like, okay, you can walk under this. Let's see what else. I think that's pretty much it for graphics. I mean, it's really good for the time, and I really like the art style. It really holds up still today, in my opinion. And it's a welcome, like, it's welcome to see it again. And like, I like they overlaid like the little motion graphics on top of the game to like give you like, oh, this is a big scene. Oh shoot. And I like that. That gives that more dramatic effect for the story parts of it. Let's see. So that means we go to sound, and what do I have to say? This music is amazing. Like, I liked the like 90s synth of it. In like, for the most part, I don't think any of the tracks are annoying. They're just really like they're really memorable, and you'll remember the soundtrack. I still remember like. What? That resume it pretty well. I'm sorry, resume? I didn't say anything about a resume. I don't know. I'm confused. What? Oh, anyway, so I before I get distracted, but like the music is really nice. I'm probably gonna get the soundtrack for the game too, and like it's very like indicative of a time before modern times. I'm like, oh, it's so rocking. And I know it's like the tradition for future Ys games as well, where they kind of have that feel like this, the rock and the synth. It's always been a part of Ys. It's very different from like it's distinct from like maybe like you guys might remember Tales, which is pretty, I don't know, not it's mostly innocuous. It's not memorable, but it's kind of there. I mean, saying it was cutting edge. Resume the game? Oh, I don't know what do you mean by resume? But I see. Yeah, it's top notch in pretty much all aspects. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, 1988, that's true. I mean, I'm trying to take that into account too. Obviously, we're not going to grade it on 2018. They didn't have the benefit of like a game design classes, or there were so many things that hadn't been invented yet at the time. Anyway, and the sound effects are serviceable. They work, and like I do like the fact that they were like, you'll remember that hit, and the hit sound is very memorable. It's very satisfying when you hear like you hear this like slicing when you hit an enemy, and then when you hit it's just like boom, and it's just like, oh, I don't want to hear me take damage, and you don't want to hear that at all. So I just think it's just really funny. It's really like, it works pretty well too. The voice acting is actually pretty good for this time. I mean, this is really the quality is actually very unusually good for this time, because they used a professional voice acting studio Like, I mean, Jim Cummings, I mean, like, that's such a big actor. How did they get him on this? Yeah, like that. Jim Cummings is like is Winnie the Pooh, I believe, right? Yeah. I'm just gonna like. I don't know if I'm remembering this wrong, but yeah, he's. If you I remember, he's yeah, he is Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, that's right. Oh, it's Sunrise the best. Yeah, Sunrise is what. Okay, that makes sense now. Yes, yes, the summary is like so. Like, yeah, the voice acting is actually pretty. Like, even if you hear the Japanese version, of course, like they actually had pretty very good voice acting to well being. They had a like Japanese voice acting at this point for games at this point in time is probably ahead of the game. I'm sorry to say. I'm sorry to say, guys. I know nostalgia is a thing, but for the most part, like the 80s and 90s certainly were not kind for translated games in terms of voice acting. It was not really until much later, like earlier to probably in the early 2000s, where there was more effort. The industry kind of caught up better. Anyway, so to get back to what I was saying, like, yeah, so actually I'm very impressed with the quality of the voice acting for the most part. I mean, like, is it the best dub thing I've ever heard in my life? Maybe not, but it's certainly better than most of its peers at this time. And I've heard, yeah, there's unfortunately the Ease 3 doesn't in the PC Turbo CD it does not get such a nice treatment, and it shows when you hear how bad it is in comparison to this game where it was like, oh, actually people are trying. It sounds actually not bad. Super cool. So, and for the most part, like, yeah, the sound mixing is like a little bit rough sometimes, where the music's way too loud over the voices, which we had a little bit of trouble with at the end near the Ease core. So, I mean, that's pretty much a small thing. Anyway, and now we come to gameplay. So here's the deal, guys. I know if this were a game that were made 10 years later, I'd be complaining about, like, why isn't there a mini map to tell you where you are? Why do you. Why is there so much random backtracking? Why are things not properly laid? Why is it so difficult to figure out where to go, or like that you have to do this certain thing because even though the game doesn't really give you good hints about it? But I also have to mention that those are the normal things I would normally ding the game for. Like, I've talked about it clearly on this stream. But this is a game from the 80s. They didn't expect you, like, the technology wasn't there for mini maps. For sure, 100%. I mean, look, it barely worked on the NES, so like even Metroid, one of the most famous games, does not have a minimap. I mean, Zelda has one. It's just very very primitive. And like at the time, like these consoles could not give you such detailed maps like you're used to from like I think that more like the Super Nintendo era. And so technology wasn't there to make your life easier because they couldn't. The number of sprites would be too much. So I have to forgive the game for like its faults of like that stuff. And like so remember that this is from the 80s. So yes, it's bad that one you have to figuring sometimes what you need to do next is very like I didn't know I had to do that. And finding your way, you can get really, really lost, like I did in Solomon Shrine and even Darm Tower. I almost got a little lost, although that was more straightforward. I think Solomon Shrine is actually a really annoying dungeon, honestly. Even with the guide, it's still like, oh, it's so long. It takes so long to get somewhere. But yeah, for the most part, like I actually almost think that Ease 1 might be better. Do you guys feel that way? I don't know if I feel like I had more fun playing Ease 1 because I like it would like the layouts of everything were simpler, except the mine was kind of like I'm not really a big fan of the mine, but At least, like other, like the mine was kind of annoying because you don't have a mini map and you have to deal with darkness, and it was like, oh my goodness. Anyway, that's just like they try to make it challenging to give you the feel of being in the cave, but I don't know, from a gameplay perspective, that's not so great. Not a great player experience. And Solomon's Shrine, the whole Goddess Shrine castle too, is just, oh my gosh, the layout is so bad. And it's so difficult to find out. So basically, you need a guide to get through this. So this is one of those games that if you didn't have a guide, you are boned, really. Or you have to spend way more time than you need to. I mean, I think in the old days, people actually like drew out a map of all the different like dungeons so that you would remember where you could go. Could you imagine that, guys? Remember, like, I know this is like a history lesson alongside a review, but like, this is the time where like, well, there were less games coming out, and games could last forever, so you just plot out the map and figure out where you needed to go. So you would experiment, because you didn't get the guides, or you just bought the guide. I mean, you just straight up go to the store, get a guide, or ask your friends or something like that. I mean, or look at game magazines. Oh my goodness, could you? This is like, that was that era, guys. That was how we got around some of these technical difficulties, so to speak. So I guess, the exploration's a little flawed. It's a lot less fun Ys 2, but I guess they try to make it expensive. But combat is still fun. Like, I will say that I'm actually kind of like surprised no one has tried to replicate like the bumper cars. I think the remake does it a bit better, where they expand on, make the rules more clear. In this game, sometimes it's hard to tell whether you're going to scrape someone or they're going to scrape you. So it's kind of nice like that. But for this game, it's still kind of fun. There are still ways to figure out how to do the bumper cars, and it's kind of fun actually. It's like you can, like I was saying, you literally can grind with one hand, because you have one hand moving the control pad and you just mow down people, and it is very, very satisfying. And there's no other game really like it, so not really, at least not to my memory. So it's still really unique, and that's actually kind of interesting, because this is a game from the 80s, and why hasn't any other game thought to replicate it? I guess maybe people don't like the system enough, but I think it's kind of fun. I would play a game like this. So I think that's probably like the best part of it, just fighting in general. The magic's kind of like, I honestly don't think the magic's not the best part of the combat. And because, like, you can't use a spell when you shoot it. And if you've noticed, you have to wait for your spell to go away before you can shoot it again. So in some bosses, you were frantically... Like, in Ys 1, you had a chance of, like, you could attack people. I actually think the bosses were better. Because, like, in Ys 2, you have to, like, almost all the bosses you have to shoot. And then, like, the final boss you don't shoot. You have to use your sword again. So it's so random. It's just, like, so inconsistent. And I don't know how I feel about that. So basically TLDR, I think Ys 1 is a better balanced game compared to Ys 2. Or Ys 2 is like, yeah, here's bosses. Everything you used in the game, forget it. You're just gonna shoot them. And then like, oh, you shot all the bosses? Well, the final boss you can't shoot them, so we're gonna force you to run them over. So it's like, okay. Yeah, it's just really strange. But otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much the Ys gameplay. And so, after saying all that stuff, what do I think about the game? Or do I recommend the game? Would I let someone rent or buy, or give it a thumbs down rent or a thumbs down buy, a thumbs down period? I don't know, guys. I mean, the game is really short, so that's one thing that's in its favor. Honestly, for this version of the game, maybe it's more of a thumbs up, and I still enjoyed it. for the most part, once I knew what to do, and it was like the other bosses are really hard, but it's kind of fun to be challenged. My heart was beating at like I don't know if you guys could see it, but my heart was beating at 100 times, like very fast during that final boss. That was like a lot of adrenaline. Maybe thumbs. I don't know. I might put it at a. If it was Ys 1, I would be like, oh yeah, thumbs up, red. It's really fun. For 2, it's maybe I might give it a thumb. Honestly, I don't know. I liked 2 sometimes, but there's a lot about 2 I don't like. So I'm kind of like, eh. I know I'm in between. Like I can't decide whether like maybe it's like I'm leaning more to a thumbs up red simply because Ys 1 is there, and I think for most people it might be just rent it and see how you feel about it, because it's such a dated game that some people may not be used to it, and like it's different than what gamers nowadays are used to, and it's still entertaining for a game of this at this age. But for most people, I might even recommend that don't bother with this version of the game unless you really, really, really want to experience history like we did. Because honestly, you would probably most people should play the Ys remake, because that one is actually canon to the rest of the series. There is a lot more. They flesh out the world a bit more better there. So it might almost be like, well, this is a thumbs down rent for most people, as in like well, I don't know, maybe it's a thumbs up rent for some people, and then a thumbs down rent as in like rent it with caution, or like try it out with caution, because it's an really old game and it's not the best version of the game really. So yeah, I mean that's that's kind of how I feel about it. It's so old that you have to really think about whether you have to be pretty open-minded about playing old games, and you probably want to have a guide by you. It's just it's too difficult to try to play this, or you can if you have lots of time and you're willing to put in the work, but I don't know. It's so obtuse. So yeah, definitely give the Ys series a try. Maybe not this version, unless you really want to experience the nostalgia of like the 80s. Otherwise, you can just play the remake, which is available on Steam. So the more fleshed out version of the game, the canon version, is definitely available very easily on Steam. So that's awesome for everybody. And I'm really glad. If you want this version, you'll probably have to play it on the real thing. Might be a bit difficult. You could play it on emulator. What's emulator? No, I'm just kidding. Of course, those exist. I will not tell you how to play it on emulator. You could play it on my real console like I did, because the console it's fairly easy to figure out a way to play this game on the actual Turbo CD. Or PC Engine Duo, or PC Engine CD, or whatever CD add-on you have for your PC Engine, or TurboGrafx 16. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. What's an emulator? I've never heard of that. But yeah, so for me it was it's worth a try. I still enjoyed it. Thumbs up rent. But for most people, it may be a thumbs down rent, as in like proceed with caution. Or don't play this version and play the PC version instead. And in the PC version, you also get to hear the rocking tunes of this version too, if you'd like to hear something closer to what you heard here, rather than the remake gives you multiple choices of like music, and you even get to choose the artwork you'd like to see, whether you like it to look more modern or something a bit more mid-90s. So anyway, yeah, I guess that's pretty much it for the review. I guess it was a positive experience overall. And it's like reminded me of those old days of gaming.